We begin in Ethiopia, where the Amara regional government has reported that Tigray rebel forces fired rockets targeting Bahir Dar city on Friday. Hundreds have been killed since fighting began in the north of the country, with at least 30,000 people forced to flee across into the border into Sudan. A communications blackout in Tigray has made it hard to get a clear view of the fighting and civilian casualties, but some of the people who made it out alive have been telling us what they saw as they fled.
Because of the war, people and children died in a miserable condition. All the bodies were left in front of us. We fled with our children only and did not take any of our belongings with us. We sat in the camp for 3 days until the government of Sudan took us.
The cannons arrived in the Hamra area from Eritrea, as well as tanks, and the gunmen in the city burned people. I went out on the street of the church, and people were dead on the ground in Hamra. Many children, elderly, women and men, even the buildings were destroyed.
With the fallout of the Tigray conflict already spilling into neighboring Sudan, Ethiopia's other northern neighbors are on the edge over the implications of a full-blown crisis. Now let's take a look at what's at stake for these countries. We start in Sudan, where at least 30,000 Ethiopian refugees have fled to Sudan at a time when the country is struggling to consolidate its own fragile peace deals. It's not clear how many more people Sudan will be willing to take before it shuts its borders. Eritrea is next. That country could be drawn into the conflict while defending its border with the northern Tigray region. 3 missiles were fired by Tigrayan forces into the Eritrean capital Asmara last Saturday. Eritrea was a sworn enemy of Ethiopia when the TPLF was the ruling party. But relations between the two countries have improved since Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed took office in 2018. Next is Somalia. Ethiopia has already pulled back hundreds of its troops, helping the government fight al-Shabaab militants. Ethiopia also has a large ethnic Somali population and shares a long, porous border with Somalia. Finally is Djibouti, a small but strategic country in the Horn of Africa. That country hosts both U.S. and Chinese military bases, and its port is Ethiopia's only access to the sea. The country has called for a peaceful resolution to the conflict and the opening of humanitarian corridors. Earlier, I spoke to Mohammed Shira, a lecturer in security risk management at Portsmouth University, UK. He explains the possibilities of Sudan being drawn into the conflict.
Now, Sudan has historically hosted a number of Ethiopian refugees, whether that was during the Derg movement, the Derg dictatorship in the 1980s, or whether that was during the TPLF regime. In the early 2000s, and whether that was now what's currently happening in the Tigray conflict. Now, Sudan so far hasn't shown any signs of being dragged into this conflict, primarily because Sudan still has a number of external influences that are also trying to mitigate this conflict. And primarily, one particular example is the United Arab Emirates, who has considerable influence with Sudan in trying to not get them involved in this conflict. Sudan has so far done an amazing job in supporting these refugees, hosting these refugees, but I don't think there's going to be a likely chance of them being joining this conflict anytime soon.
Despite Sudan having a border dispute with Ethiopia?
Yeah, despite of that. Remember that TPLF regime used to have an alliance or friendly relations with Omar Bashir, but then again, Omar Bashir is no longer there. You have a new transitional government that somehow has a lot of influences from external countries that also are trying to prevent Sudan from getting from entering this conflict in general. So again, the old guard has finished. Omar Bashir is gone, so that the level of leverage that the TPLF used to have previously is no longer there.
Now, the TPLF has accused Eritrea of supporting the government. Allegations that Eritrea has denied. Give us a sense of how this crisis is affecting regional stability in the Horn of Africa.
Okay, essentially, from what we're seeing so far, the TPLF is resting on a provocation strategy. That means that they're trying to internationalize the whole conflict and also regionalize as well. By that, I mean they have tried to fire some missiles. They've actually fired missiles into Asmara in order to draw Eritrea in. But Eritrea so far has shown considerable restraint.
And now to Uganda, where pop star turned politician Bobi Wine has been released on bail. Wine, whose real name is Robert Changalai, was arrested on Wednesday for violating anti-coronavirus measures by holding mass rallies ahead of the country's general elections in January. At least 37 people were killed in a military crackdown on protesters after his arrest. He is seen as the strongest opposition to President Yoweri Museveni, who has ruled the country for 34 years. And finally, the number of coronavirus cases in Africa has crossed the 2 million mark. Nearly 50,000 people have died, making the region's fatality rate the third highest in the world, behind Latin America and the Middle East. The WHO says the recent surge in infections have been traced back to family gatherings and workplace interactions, as well as election campaigns in countries due to elect new leaders. And that's Africa Matters this week. Thanks for watching.